So good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for coming to our evening lecture this evening. Before I start, can you just note to have your phones on silent, please. And this evening we have Mark Stockil to present to us on Lean Sigma. And in this presentation, Mark will explain the development of Lean Sigma approach and speak to the benefits that it can bring to organizations. We'll also discuss how organizations may approach Lean Sigma in a practical manner. And finally, the presentation will conclude on the future of Lean Sigma. Mark is a subject matter expert and over the last 30 years has held a range of management positions in multinational organizations and has experience of a broad range of industries. So we're delighted to welcome him here tonight and just pass it over to Mark. So thanks very much, Mark.
Thanks very much. So thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you all for coming along this evening, and thanks to everybody online for tuning in. And what I'd like to do this evening is just give you a flavor for Lean and Six Sigma and the history of them, and talk to you a little bit about, what is behind them, what drives those particular thoughts, or what's involved in getting a Lean Sigma environment up and running. As was mentioned, I suppose I have a variety of different roles in my background. I'm a production engineer graduate from the University of Limerick way back, and before Lean and before Six Sigma were even recognized, unfortunately, I graduated, so I had to live through the development of these. And I've been very lucky with the organizations I've worked with, because they all played parts, I suppose, in developing my knowledge of this. And the same, I think, for any of you. If you think back to the areas that you've worked in and what you've learned about making improvement, that all fits with what we're actually talking about this evening. So I'm not going to go into very much detail there about myself, but what I do want to say is that in all of the time that I've been working over the years, I get called a subject matter expert. I don't feel that I'm a subject matter expert to that level. I think that everybody should be learning all the time. I'm definitely learning with every client that I actually engage with. Every circumstance is different. There's no one shoe fits all when we're doing this. And I don't have all the answers. I have a lot of knowledge, and hopefully I come to some conclusions regarding answers, quickly, but sometimes we have to look for help. And it's great to have, a group of people that you can work with that develop the knowledge and challenge you. And you should always have an open mind so that you can actually develop your own knowledge. And I hope that that's what I try to do. I'm not all that successful at it sometimes. We all get entrenched in our thinking, but we do have to open our mind. And that's one thing that you're going to have to think about as we talk about Lean and Six Sigma. So what we'll go through today is we'll talk a little bit about the history, where they came from, and we'll also look at the basics. I want to look at 4 themes that are the core for me of what Lean and Six Sigma are really trying to bring to the table. Once we've done that, I'll talk to you about what could you just do, even if you were leaving here this evening and you wanted to work on this and say, well, I want to try something. Well, what would you do? So I'll try to explain what I think you can do there. And I'll also talk to you about some of the pitfalls that have occurred in the past and the difficulties of just thinking, oh, we can do this. I wish it was that easy. The final piece that I'll speak on this evening will be what's next? What can we do, or what do I think is coming down the road? Because we've been through a lot of history in terms of improvement. And to start, I'm really going to take you back in history a little bit. Okay, so in terms of the history of this, not knowing the backgrounds of everybody in terms of where you've worked previously, I just want to bring you back about 100 or more years and the idea of mass production. So we came through the 1800s and we kind of started drifting in as humans into cities. We came out into the early 1900s and population explosion started happening. We had a huge demand in cities for products, whether it was clothing, whether it was delf, whether it was just, tools. And this led us to understand that we needed to make things quickly and that the same item would satisfy masses of people. And therefore we ended up with mass production. And in the production environment that we actually had at that time, we had people working in, pretty cramped conditions. We didn't have anything in terms of structure for the work. It was only in the early 1900s that people started studying work and workflow. And it's at that time that we started looking at how to make things better. And we might think that mass production has disappeared nowadays, but I always like to think of this being a call center as another form of mass production. So 100 years or 120 years later, we're still into mass production. So how can we make it different? What is it that we can do in the workplace that even though we're providing for the masses, we may not be doing the traditional mass production? And that's where Lean and Six Sigma come in. I'm going to take you to a small video for a second, just to give you a flavor for one of the key elements of the flow concept that Henry Ford brought to the Lean Sigma environment. This was the first time in 1908 to 1913, when they built Highland Park, that you started to see the idea of flow occur in manufacturing, where instead of the unit being built from scratch in one location, the unit moved in a flow line and was built, being the car, in a flow line. So Henry Ford didn't invent the car, but what he did invent was the production flow line, the first type of automated line, which we started building on over the last 120 years. So just bear with me as we flip this. Just to pause it there, they're the workers leaving the facility. So just a huge number of people. So the video link is that particular one if you want to watch the rest of the video. I just wanted to actually give you a flavor for mass production as it was back then. In terms of the development at the time, Henry Ford put a lot of effort into providing mass product for people. And remember, at the time, there were no roads infrastructure really. So the roads came after the car. And that was a huge development in the United States. And then the people that were actually making, you saw the volume of people there, the people that are making the car start buying the car. And this is a big deal. And that's one key element of what is developed from a Lean Sigma point of view, this concept of flow. We really need to get that clear in our heads, that we're looking for flow. And anything that stops flow in our facility, and it doesn't matter nowadays whether it's in a service facility or in a production facility, in an administrative, in an office, in a bank, in healthcare, impediments to flow are what we're ultimately going to be trying to stop. The history of Lean is shown on the left-hand side here, and on the right-hand side is the history of Six Sigma. And I won't have time to get into the detail of these, but there are key players that have been playing parts in this for the last 100 years. About the 1950s, in the lean side, you had Taiichi Ono and Seigo Shingo from the 50s, the 60s, and 70s developing what we call the Toyota production system. On the right-hand side, in the red box, you have Edwards Deming, who in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s started propagating the ideas from Hawthorne that Walter Short actually developed. And Deming went to Japan and is highly recognized there for his work. And his philosophy, he has 14 points, if you ever have time to check them out, for any business to kind of adopt in terms of being successful in business. And these become core to the whole environment that we try to create in Lean and Six Sigma. Ultimately, the idea of any improvement program is to do things cheaper, faster, and better. We want to try and make sure that as an organization, we are managing what the customer needs and that we're delivering customer satisfaction. And ultimately, we have to still consider, and it seems kind of, everybody says it, the customer is king. But the customer is king. Because if you don't have a customer, you don't have cash flow. And if you don't have cash flow in a business, you have a serious problem. And even if you take the public sector, if you don't have money and satisfied customers, people start to look at better ways to do things. If you don't have flow, people start giving out about it. You spend more time trying to address the problems and the perception than actually fixing the flow. And it drains huge amounts of energy from people that could be channeling their energies elsewhere. And all of this, we're expected to do cheaper, faster, and better, do things faster, do them better. And we drive it. We're all customers. So when we talk about the fact that we want things faster or we want things cheaper, and people are scrambling to get things done, it's because the customer, who's us, demands it. There's very few people I meet that would say they don't want things cheaper, faster, but better. I know I want cheaper, faster, and better. And therefore, we articulate that in different ways. Walter Short started this concept of plan, do, check, act, plan, do, study, act, as a core idea for continuous improvement. So the idea that you plan to do something, and then you do it. And then you check to see, is it doing what you wanted it to do? And if it is, you have to keep it doing that or improve it. And if it isn't, you have to improve it anyway. So this continuous cycle is something we have to embed in our work ethos. The way this was done in Toyota was to actually look at it from the customer's point of view. And on top of this particular house that represents the system, you have the customer front and fore. On the two sides, you have the idea of one, JIT, which is all to do with flow. It's all to do with doing things just in time, creating the flow. And on the right-hand side is a concept of Jidoka. And that concept is about understanding where human intervention and repetitive jobs can be separated. Where we can look at the man and the machine and we can actually separate them out. And one of the things that I think has been missed a lot of the time is that in doing that, it's not all about automating. It's about understanding how we can use the power of the human mind to make improvement. It's not all negative. We do see things in a negative light, but as technology develops and we see that jobs are lost, it's not all negative. What we're not doing is we're not continuing to upskill. And it's really important that we upskill people as jobs change. because they need to be able to take on the next level of jobs. And this area is where we need to look at the holistic approach of the Toyota system and the involvement of people. It's not just about making things more efficient, but it's about bringing all of our employees with us. Organizations run on people. This is a core piece of everything that every organization does. We rely on people to make things happen. The foundation, of course, is going to be very important. We have to work towards having a stable environment, and we have to work towards having a standardized environment. So these are the contributors to what the Toyota production system became. The method for Lean is that we identify customer value. And customer value is not that easy always to put your finger on. Because I said it's cheaper, faster, better, but my cheaper, faster, better, it might be different to your cheaper, faster, better, or your cheaper, faster, better. So definition of what the customer is looking for is very different. We have to find some way to find the value in what we're doing from the customer's perspective. A lot of the time, we decide internally in organizations what the value actually is. We define the value. It'll be all right, or should they take it? It'll be okay. And we lose the customer. We may not know we're losing them, but we lose them. Value has to be defined by the customer, not by us. The second piece then is to map this out. So if we're going to look at flow, we have to understand what the process actually is. So we will map it out. Once we have mapped it out, we can look to see that the flow is occurring, or where the barriers are, where the waste is. And then we can develop into reacting to the customer rather than having to just stock up stuff or not be able to react on a day-to-day basis to every customer by being lost in terms of not having the inventory in the right place at the right time, not having the service in the right place at the right time, because we didn't plan it properly, we didn't know what they wanted, we didn't have the flow in place to be able to react. We need to develop our systems to react to what the customer wants, not to what we want to give them. And we have to keep doing this. And in doing that, we have to respect everybody. Everybody needs respect. And that means our employees, our management, our shareholders, stakeholders, and our customers, and our suppliers. Everybody in the system must be treated with respect. On the Six Sigma side, what we're looking at is variation. Six Sigma is really aimed at looking at processes in numeric terms, painting a picture of the process, and trying to evaluate, is this process capable? So if I was to summarize Lean, I'd be saying, right, it's about elimination of waste and respect for people. If I look at Six Sigma, it's all about, let's draw a picture of the process, let's use the data, let's understand the data, and let's make sure that we can actually reduce the variation. Let's be more consistent with less variation. And that's not that easy to get. We can have wide variation or we can have narrow variation. We can still talk in terms of averages because we can say on average our performance is good, but what about the fringes? And that's where variation comes in. The other part of Six Sigma is define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. This is the stepped program that we can use to solve problems in the workplace, big or small. And this system gives us a really powerful way of embedding changes in processes for the better in our system, which we're not always good at following up on. I'll come back to this a little later on. To get the whole system working, the idea is that if we can reduce the number of non-value added steps, in other words, if we can remove the waste And we can increase or decrease the actual variation, increase the value that we're getting then on the steps that are value added, we will reach a Lean Sigma environment. And I use the term Lean Sigma. A lot of people use the term Lean Six Sigma. And people often say to me, well, okay, Mark, what's the Lean Sigma? What's the Lean Six Sigma? And for a lot of people, they're the same thing. I remove the 6 simply because sometimes 6 is not actually the target. And I don't mean that 3 or 4 is good enough. I mean, I'm maybe looking at 7 or 8. Sigma is a continuum. 6 works for the mathematics of what we do generally. But a Lean Sigma culture needs to continuously improve, which means going beyond 6 Sigma when we get there. And that's extremely challenging, but often necessary. If we look at what we're really trying to get at the end of the day for any organization, and whether it's the Irish Guide Dogs, or whether it's the CUH Hospital, or the Royal College of Surgeons, or it's SR Technics, or it's Symantec Corporation, all different types of businesses, what are we trying to achieve? Well, ultimately, we're trying to make money. We're trying to use the money then to service what we actually do. So in a charity, we're trying to get the money fundraising so that for the Irish Guide Dogs, they can actually provide, guide dogs and assistance dogs. And the more they can take in terms of take out waste, the more money they have to put into satisfying more clients. If you look at a business like Symantec, or you look at SR Technics, the more waste they can take out, the more potential they have to satisfy customers with a reduced price or increase their own profit. And this is really important. That's what businesses are about. That's what any business is about. That's what my business is about. It's trying to eliminate waste, stay competitive, stay in the business for the long term. So we're trying to get the voice of the business connected with the voice of the customer, and then connected with the voice of the process. So the process is the internal piece, the customer is obviously external, and then we have this idea of running a business and being successful running the business. I mentioned I wanted to talk specifically about 4 themes. So the 4 themes that I'd like to talk about are the customer, respect, reduced variation, and reduced waste. These are the things that we're going to try and tackle to make things better in the workplace. And this is what Lean Sigma is about. So we'll start with the voice of the customer. And just to get an idea in terms of the customer, I mentioned cheaper, faster, better. We can also look at it in terms of understanding the customer's needs. How do you go about finding customer needs? Who do you ask for customer needs? It seems like a kind of a silly question, but don't you ask your customer? How many times do you go and ask your customer what are they actually looking for? We need to constantly look at our customers. Our customers change their mind. I change my mind. We seem to have this idea that if we ask our customer once what they want, that's it. We go off now and we'll design our product and we'll do this and that'll be it and they'll be happy with that. It's great. We give them a great product. We give them a great service. But the minute they get a different experience, they may want something different. So this is not a process that you go ask once. This is a process of engagement. So the voice of the customer is a process of engagement with our customers to continuously check that they are happy and that we are anticipating their needs. Because happy is reactive. Happy is they haven't complained. But anticipation of needs means we're out there looking to see what are they looking for next. How can we help them next? And therefore, we have to look at this in an active way. We have to actively seek customer knowledge. So keep an eye on the way you interact with your customer and make sure that it's not just a kind of a one-off, that you ask, you constantly get feedback from the customer. I consider a customer complaint to be a golden nugget of information. And that sometimes puts people off. They're kind of going, oh, I don't need another customer complaint. Oh no, not another one of them. I don't want a customer complaint, but if I get a customer complaint, it's really important that I treat it with respect. Not everybody complains. Not everybody takes the time to complain. So if somebody does take the time to complain, I have to look at it. Fine, I need to fix the incident, but I have to take that and look at it a little bit deeper and be very self-critical about how can I make the process better so this doesn't happen again. Not just a band-aid solution, but something that's going to last. When it comes to respect, I have a question I'd like to ask you. So this is the question. So the question is, when was the last time you went to work to do the job badly? Anyone? Any hands up? I can't check online to see if the hands are going up, but anybody? No? And you might say, well, Mark, that's kind of a silly question. I've never gone to work to do the job badly. So let me ask you something else. Have you ever gone to work and had this happen? Where the finger was pointed at you for doing it wrong? Where the finger of blame came out and said, you, why did that happen? Why did you do that? Oh no, not again. Now I have to deal with this. So can we not realize that if we generally do not go into work to do the job incorrectly, that the first response shouldn't be to blame people? Can we not get that? Because that's really crucial. Our first response should be, how did the system break down? Diego Shingo had this idea of mistake proofing. Deming talked about respect. And he talked about management having to make sure that instead of blaming people, they focus on fixing the system that put the person in the position of making the mistake. That's what we do a lot. When we're under pressure, we are more prone to make mistakes. So respect is very challenging because most of us have actually seen the finger pointing and the blame more than we see the respect of, let's dig in and find out how did this go wrong. And as a manager, I've had the unfortunate experience of pointing the finger and finding that it just comes back doing this at me. Right? And this happens. Oh, that's because you asked us to do this. Oh yeah, sorry. So I've learned as much as possible to put my finger in my pocket. Keep it there because I don't want to pull the trigger on it because that's not the first response. It doesn't help. Most people that are doing a job, when a mistake is made that becomes an issue, feel bad enough. We don't need to point it out. So let's step back and say, well, what should we do? Well, what we should do is we should investigate why. How could we protect the person from making that mistake in the future become a defect? Because they're going to make mistakes. It's not about not making mistakes. We'll all misstep. But how do we make sure that we learn from it? And we develop a system that reminds us if we're going to make a mistake. And that's what Shingo spent a lot of his time doing in the Toyota production system. As a matter of fact, Toyota talk about the fact that they grow leaders. They talk about the fact that, we don't tell people what to do. I like to think of a Lean Sigma environment as an environment where when you go to work, you can see what needs to be done. You don't actually have to be told what to do. That it's a visual environment. It's an environment that shows the direction that needs to be gone in for everybody, no matter what level in the organization they are. That the systems are there, that the people are empowered to do what needs to be done without having to be told. And that might seem very far out there, but that's the aim. The journey is getting there. And a key thing is that we can only learn by making mistakes. Even from the time we were kids, right? If we fall in a fountain, we learn it's not a good thing to do. Sorry. So this is something that we have to understand. When we make a mistake, we learn from it. But sometimes we don't change anything. We just hope we don't do it again. And that's not good enough. Right? Or we retrain the person. It's not like they haven't been trained before. But if we have trained them and they've made the mistake, then you have to think, hang on a second, there must be something we're doing wrong. Our assumption shouldn't be for the few, it should be for the many, and the many go to work to do the job right. The next theme, we've done two, voice of the customer and respect. The next theme of the system is about elimination of waste. To eliminate waste, we have to identify waste. And what happens is, if we have uneven demand and we have overburdening, then waste occurs. What we've got to do is identify this waste and eliminate it. There really is nothing as wasteful as doing something efficiently that doesn't need to be done. Not my quote, anonymous, but the reality is that when we actually map out processes, and this is a bit frightening, and we look at all the steps we take, if it's the first time you've done it, you can find that up to 80% is the waste side of the equation, and only 20% is value add from a customer point of view. And that's a challenging thing to get your head around. So there's lots of opportunities to make improvement, and identifying waste is a key way of doing that. When we look at variation, the fourth theme, what we do is we draw pictures. We get data, so we collect data. And we draw pictures to see the spread of the data. So on the top chart there, you can see a wide spread of data. And it narrows down each time. So if we can get a narrow spread, we are more consistent. If you look at this chart, the average performance is no different. However, the customer receiving the top versus the customer receiving the bottom will feel very differently. The customer on top is going to feel, yeah, okay, your average performance is great, but I can't depend on it, because I don't know whether you're going to be 6 weeks late or 6 weeks early. On the bottom, they're saying, yeah, it's a good, the average performance is okay, and the extremes are really nice, because they're not too extreme. I know I'm going to get it, plus or minus 2 days. And plus or minus 1 day becomes the target. And plus or minus half a day becomes the target. On the day becomes the target. So narrowing the variation and getting the right average performance must be done in tandem. They're not something that you can separate. They mean different things. And that's why often you'll see your customer, why are the customers still giving out? Our average performance is great. It's not just about averaging. We can hide behind the average. There are examples of what we look at in the variation world. We look at what is common and what is not common. Not common can be special cause, so we can say, oh, that's why that happened. But the common cause is much more difficult to deal with because it's the work environment that we have. It's the conditions. It's the feeling we have when we go to work. Are we happy? Are we sad because of the area we work in? Are we proud? Does anybody stand in the way of our workmanship? Because then we don't feel good engaging in work. So the work conditions take a lot more effort to correct. So when we look at variation, we look at a specification and we say to ourselves, right, where's our performance? This is where Six Sigma is really powerful. We can look at the numbers and we can say, right, if we're in this position, we know that we're not performing. We're off to the side. Our average performance is not on target and the variation isn't great. Now we shift. This is often culture change. This is, we've got to change the average performance. Fundamentally, the process is not able to do what we want it to do. If we're in a sandwich making shop and everybody in the queue wants to wait 5 minutes and it's 15 minutes waiting and the process is consistent, but it's not good enough, the average performance, the fundamental things that might have to change might include having a different setup for making the sandwiches. It might involve equipment. It might involve thinking very differently. So it's fundamental change. And therefore, if we get over that and we move in, we can suddenly get to the point where, right, now we're on target, but our variation is that bit too unstable. Let's put it in. And what we want to get to is this. And in an ideal starting position that we'd like to get to would be the Six Sigma one, where the tails outside the specification would only be 3.4 in every million. That's a Six Sigma environment. And if we get there, we can start moving towards 6.1 Sigma, 6.2 Sigma, 7 Sigma. We may have other things to do, but we can try to get there, and then we can continue. Okay. So they are the themes that I wanted to talk to you about. So how could you actually take something from this and say, right, okay, what am I supposed to do, Mark? How do I start on this? And there are an enormous number of tools that you can use. The first thing you need to try and understand, I suppose, is that you do need to educate yourself on the detail of some of this. You need to understand what define, measure, analyze, improve, and control actually mean. Once you do that, the tools you've used anyway. I mean, people have used pie charts. You have drawn flowcharts. You have gone and looked to see what's happening. But by putting the tools together with an understanding of define, measure, analyze, improve, and control, you get a better system for applying them. So the tools that we use in the define stage. Define is all about understanding the problems that we have and then looking at what we need to do to get a better performance. Not necessarily the fix, or as I call it, solutionizing. I don't want to go there. What I want to do in define is understand the level of performance I should be at. Then I can do projects to get to the root cause of why I'm not getting there and implement solutions. And that's taking me through D, M, A, I. And then I've got to do the last step, which is really difficult, which is embedded in our day-to-day culture. Make sure that the door is closed and I have an operational solution in place. And we often fall down with that. Oh, I haven't got time. Yeah, we've got to get those in bed. I've got to train that person. I've got to show this person. I've got to do this. And we don't do it. Publishing a SOP doesn't fix a problem. Engagement in define fixes problems. In other words, you can't go on telling people what to do. You've got to get them involved and embedded in the improvement at the start. So some simple things that you can do is go see Gemba. Go into the workplace and actually see what's going on. And do it every day. So you walk the workplace to look and see what the issues are. No matter what level in the organization you are, you need to understand what's happening in the service area or in the production area. The other thing you can do is you can map it. It doesn't matter if you get the symbols wrong. It doesn't matter about that at all. What it matters is, do you get the group of people working in the process together to draw the picture and share what they believe the process is doing? And it's quite revealing when somebody says, oh, I didn't know you did that. I do this. Oh, I do that too. I didn't know you were doing it, so I duplicate it. This happens in so many different processes. So getting people together will often eliminate some of that. So mapping is relatively easy to do, and if you make mistakes, you just have to try again and learn. You can brainstorm. You've all brainstormed. We've all been involved in brainstorming. It's not something that, you know, is foreign to people. So just ask people to sit down and say, right, where are the problems? And then you can put them in an affinity group and you can decide, right, let's put them in it together in like ideas and let's just, you know, whoever has the most post-its, if that's where you start, there are better ways, but if that's where you start, just start. I like to force people to look for where the pain points are. Not necessarily what the customer wants first, but where are the pain points for our staff? And let's try to fix something for them because we're going to ask a lot of them anyway. So let's fix something for them. And that will help us with the customer. And it's getting the balance in that right that's important. Another thing you could do is a fundamental starting point can be to organize the workplace. And there's a tool called 5S. A little bit more complicated, but ultimately not. 5S is all about organizing the workplace, making it a visual workplace. And there's lots of videos online that could show you how to do this. So this is something you could try out and see how you get on. And it's not just, remember, it's not about just cleaning up. It's about sustaining a newly organized workplace. So it's like taking these areas. So if you look at these areas and you say to yourself, okay, what do you see? Well, you see, you know, maybe clutter, disorganization. We often don't see things that are in our way. Here's a whole area of things that are in our way. This was a 5S exercise that was done, and all of this stuff was like, oh, we don't need that, oh, we don't need that, oh, we don't need that. Right? The table wasn't big enough, so we went to the floor. The floor wasn't big enough, so we had to go outside the cubicle. And this is stuff that we didn't need in the work area. It could be improved to make it look like this. It's not difficult to do this. And you might say, oh, well, that was just cleaned up. That was only the first stage. All of the other stuff had to be taken out. We had to decide, are we keeping it, are we storing it, are we getting rid of it? And then it had to be sustained. And what I liked about this was the general manager involved in this sustained this. I went back after about 3.5, 4 years. It was still being sustained. That's a success story. And they were continuously improving. It's hard to do that because unless management get it, it's not going to sustain. So when you're Gemba, you have to point out the things that are unacceptable as a manager. But staff then will rise to that. They'll say, yeah, that's not acceptable. It's not about giving out. It's just about, you know, gently reminding people that, you know, that's not a good thing to do. You don't have to be harsh. People would say, right, what's in this stuff for me? What do I get? How do I get something from this? You know, I've heard a lot about this. Organizations have tried this many, many times. Why doesn't it work all the time? 2 different studies identified the fact that about 1/3 of organizations would declare their improvement drives a success. There is a change in mindset required to deliver on these types of improvement ideals. It's not something you take off of a book. It's not something that you can just take a bit of. And that's one of the fundamental problems that we have. My feeling is that when we start out on a DMAIC journey and using DMAIC, we often scoot through it in a hurry. When we start out with a Lean Sigma endeavor, we tend to leave out bits that don't suit us, or the more challenging bits. And the problem is, if we leave out a bit, the house falls down. So we need to do this holistically. We have to take all the pieces together to make it work. We've got to stop jumping to solutions before we understand the problem. An awful lot of the projects that we do, people initially jump to, the solution will be. So just go away and do it. Don't try to fool us into thinking that you're doing Lean or Six Sigma. Just continue doing what you're doing. Jump to conclusions. When it comes back and you've put that Band-Aid on it, and you come back later on and it's still happening, maybe you listen. This is a huge mistake that we make. We say to, we might say to an engineer, seeing as I'm talking to a group of engineers, we might say to an engineer, we need a fix for this. And it's not that the person's going away to do anything wrong. They go away and they identify a fix, and then they put the fix in place, and everyone goes, yay, fix it, right? And then the engineer moves away, and someone on the service area, the production area, turns around and says, like, why are we doing that? I don't know. I don't know what it's about. They said to do it. I don't understand why we're doing it. I don't understand the impact of not doing it because I wasn't involved. We have to take the time to give people the time to get involved. There's a thing called a time tsunami that I like to refer to here. When we get started on this endeavor, it's going to absorb time. It's going to absorb time in terms of understanding, education, trying things. And the first time we do projects, they may not all work. But we need to learn from them consistently. And a big problem that I've experienced is this idea of jumping to solutions. And don't think I'm brilliant at this. I'm always walking around going, solution. Oh, no, stop. Wait for the time for the solution. Work the process and make sure the solution is the right solution. But don't close your mind to other solutions. We can't do that. They won't let us. Who's they? If it makes sense, people should let people do things. The justification is really important. 20% of the effort of Lean Sigma is easy. 80% isn't. The soft stuff is the hard stuff. I can teach you all the tools, you can use them. I can teach you the statistics even. The maths isn't that hard. You're going to follow formula. But there's no formula for people. That's why respect is so important in all of this. And it's easily forgotten in these initiatives. There's a proposal that says that we should look at leader standards work. And that we should look at visual displays, daily accountability, and leadership discipline. So the majority of the success of this is on the management shoulders. It's not on everybody else's. It's a management shouldering responsibility. And sometimes if it doesn't work initially, people go, I don't want to know. So 2/3, it would seem from the surveys, say, I don't want to know. Let's give up. And 30% stick with it and get to understand it. You don't have to do this journey on your own if you're interested in going forward and actually as an organization or the organization you're working with, getting support for that. And I'm not trying to do a sales pitch here for me. I'm trying to do it for, for all of the different support organizations that are actually in existence. From the local enterprise offices, which do supports for small companies, to Enterprise Ireland and the IDA. And they have very good people that are there to support you. SkillsNet have a variety of SkillsNet that actually support it. And you have specific organizations like Lean Construction Ireland. You have organizations like Lean Business Ireland. You have the Southwest Lean Forum in the local area here, which is set up as a networking group for understanding how others do this. So don't feel that you have to be there on your own doing this. And don't even think that you have to be dependent on consultants. You do not. You can do this yourself. Finally, I suppose I'm looking at where do we go next with Lean and Six Sigma? Because I was asked that question originally, and I was saying, I wonder where we go with this. But for me, it's a little bit back to the future, or future to the back, because ultimately, this isn't necessarily changing. Business has always been about continuous improvement. Whether you call it the Toyota production system, whether you call it operational excellence, OpEx, whether you call it service design, whether you call it business excellence, is irrelevant in a lot of ways. It's all about making improvement and staying in business long term and facilitating your customers long term. And, you know, we do a lot of work with the public service groups, and for them, it's about giving better service and getting more from the huge effort that people are putting in, but aligning that effort correctly. Right? Giving something so that the staff get something from it and the clients get something from it. And trying not to make mistakes. Business is really, I suppose, about the basics of staying in the game. And that's going to involve respect, integrity, and trust in your organizations. So ultimately, if you're going to stick with this, that's what I think is going to happen. I think we're just going to continue trying to continuously improve. That's what it's about. And it'll get called other names. But fundamentally, it's going to be about that in the future as well. Okay, so thank you very much.